Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to session 9 of the RIAK Discovery series. So for anybody that's new to these sessions, Discovery series, basically what it's about is, kind of as the name suggests, really discovering something about yourself as a rider, as an athlete. So we've done all kinds of sessions, as we're just about to get started in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. As I say, we've done all kinds of sessions really testing kind of different aspects of fitness, testing kind of different qualities as a rider. Now, in this session, we're testing that aerobic threshold basically. So it's a very straightforward session, quite a blunt instrument. We've got the normal sort of 10-minute build, fast pedaling efforts, a little cruise section, and then the session from there. It's very straightforward. It's just 2 times 15 minutes at your FTP. Now we're running this session in erg mode, so keeping erg mode on. There's a little kind of caveat to that. So basically, the challenge is if your cadence drops below about 80 RPM, that is an inefficient cadence. And if it drops below about 80 RPM for more than 15 to 30 seconds, game over. Okay, well, not game over, still finish the session, but just turn erg mode off basically, because ultimately what we want is you to be pedaling nice and efficiently, and not kind of trawling along with a big heavy gear. Okay, so we're testing aerobic threshold. Now, for anybody that is new to these sessions, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Rich. I'm the founder and head coach at RIAK Fitness. We're a coaching outfit. We've got all kinds of coaching relationships, supervised, unsupervised. We've got on-demand plans. We've got series of on-demand sessions, all kinds of stuff. You'll see the various ads running above my head. So head to our website, check all that out. And we've got some new projects in the mix coming soon. So, here we are. This is what we call an end of range session. Okay? So, this is kind of the sort of session that you kind of need to be on good form for. Now, don't let that put you off. I'm not saying if you're not feeling amazing, world beating sort of condition, don't do it. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, basically, the goal with the session is to take you kind of pretty much to your edge. Now, don't be intimidated by that, okay? Because as I say, if your cadence drops too low, bang erg mode off. Or to be honest, if you're suffering beyond kind of the level of effort that we will kind of indicate to you as we go through, then of course, drop out of erg mode and ride a bit more freely. Okay, so if anyone is not familiar with erg mode, it's basically a setting on the smart trainers where it sets the flywheel so that it wants to spin at a particular velocity with a certain resistance, and it effectively allows you to ride at very specific power consistently. It's a hugely effective training tool. Can become a bit of a crutch, can also be counterproductive, particularly if it's used too much. So if you're interested to know more and kind of when is appropriate and when it's not appropriate to use erg mode, there is a helpful, albeit not super exciting, but article on our website. Just head to the online training resources section, which is available on our coaching and on our online RIAK online page. So that article's there, and I'll just tell you a bit more about erg mode, when to use it, when not to use it. So typically, actually, doing this type of session, we would actually advise people to turn erg mode off, because they're basically time trial efforts, and one of the skills you want to develop at a time when you're doing time trial efforts is the ability to hold power consistently. But we are keeping it on for this session for a very specific purpose, okay? And that's to basically really challenge you and take you to the edge of that aerobic threshold that your FTP is meant to represent. And that's why it's 2 times 15 minutes at FTP. I will talk a little bit more about your aerobic threshold and FTP in a second, but just kind of give you a sense of the purpose of this session. Is an end of range session, so it's not necessarily intended that you kind of be able to kind of do this session absolutely perfectly. So just take some of the pressure off yourself and don't be intimidated by the length of the intervals. As you say, your cadence drops below 80 for more than 15-30 seconds, turn erg mode off, and likewise if your effort is disproportionately high, turn erg mode off as well, and just try and do your best to hit the targets again with it off. So your FTP, it's meant to be the effort, meant to be the power that you can hold for a full hour. Okay, it's called your aerobic threshold. It's basically the tipping point at which your body goes from working with enough oxygen to buffer the build-up of lactate and hydrogen ions to working more and more in the absence of oxygen. Okay, it's that kind of tipping point at which things start to get a bit gnarly, basically. Never used that word in my life before, I don't know why I chose that one. So basically, guys, the reason that this is such a great session in terms of profiling athletes and discovering about yourself is because this should be manageable. Really, if your FTP is right and you're not on a totally terrible day, this should be manageable. Don't get me wrong, it's going to be hard, but it should be manageable. Because really, you should be able to hold these efforts for a damn sight longer. Ideally, we'd do something like a 40k time trial in order to really assess how effective, how well set your FTP is. But a 40k time trial, or a full hour's test, which is why many people do 40k time trials, is typically they take around an hour to do. Absolutely brutal. You would be done for at least the next 2 days. They are horrible, which is why we're not doing it, because it's not. No one would come to the session, I don't think. We've done 10 to 20. We've got a 20k time trial as part of this series, but I think that's about as far as we'd be willing to go. So, essentially, guys, if you really struggle to hold the 15-minute intervals, it can kind of tell you a few things, really. Probably the most common reasons is, one, you're perhaps lacking a bit of aerobic base, aerobic fitness. So you might be super strong, you might do a lot of high intensity training, you might have good kind of top end power and anaerobic power, etc., and a good VO2 effort, a good VO2 capacity. But if you can't hold that power for very long, then it means you need to do some lower intensity kind of base training to help you be able to hold that power for longer. So that's one reason. Another reason is that your FTP is just not right. And that's actually something we see a lot. Again, another article you'll find in our training resources area on our website is an article on FTP. And we talk through, in that article, we talk a little bit about the different types of testing, some of the most common. And the two most common are the ramp test and the 20-minute test. Now, one downside with these is you've basically got your anaerobic systems nice and fresh, you've got your fast switch muscle fibers firing on all cylinders, and basically with those two types of tests, it does mean that your FTP can be a little bit pumped up. Okay, does mean that they are lending a bit too much of a hand, and in some cases we have actually seen instances where it's been pumped up or exaggerated by up to 30 watts. So yeah, it's just something to be aware of. A session like this is going to tell you quite bluntly whether your FTP is set too high, and sometimes it's done unwittingly. Sometimes it's because people have had a layoff due to injury or illness, and perhaps have just try to come back in at the same level. And I think that's the point to make, really, is your FTP isn't a static thing. It changes actually on a daily basis, depending on your fatigue levels, etc. But obviously, by a small margin, but if you have a long layoff, months at a time, that FTP will change fairly significantly, and it takes a bit of time to come back. And so if you are doing sort of training using erg mode, the type of training that we do on RGT in these sessions, where it's set as a percentage of your FTP, if your FTP is wrong, you might not be working the right energy system. Anyway, so here we are with the first fast pedaling effort. So let's spin up those legs, just sort of soften the elbows a little bit, draw the shoulders away from the ears. We're looking to get a cadence upwards of 100 RPM without bouncing up and down the saddle. Okay, so this is an opportunity to get those fast twitch muscles fibers going that I was talking about. Get those legs nice and warm. So we're not too worried about the anaerobic systems and the fast twitch muscle fibers lending a hand today. We need all the help we can get on these ones because they are long intervals. Okay, so last sort of 10 seconds or so on this first fast pedaling effort. Just keep it going, keeping that leg speed above about 100 RPM. Okay, there we go, good stuff. And relax, back down to about 65% of FTP. So if you're interested, those fast pedaling efforts, they're set at around 80-85% of FTP. Okay, so not super hard, sort of strong efforts. Should feel relatively comfortable though. Okay, so there's various things we're going to be talking about in this session. I try not to talk too much during the threshold intervals other than to kind of give you a little bit of helping hand in terms of motivation, etc. Because you're not going to want to listen to me when you're at your threshold. Try and give you a few pointers when we're in the recovery breaks. For now though, let's just focus on these fast pedaling efforts. We're at around 100 RPM for the first one. Let's look to see if we can get to around 110, which is where the cadence target is set officially. So here we go then. Let's get ready to spin those legs up. When you're doing these fast pedaling efforts, guys, really make sure you're relaxed in the upper body. If you're all stiff and tense, you start to bounce up and down, and we don't want that. We want our arms to act like shock absorbers as we spin the legs up. So keep it going. Okay, we're over halfway, so we're looking for around 110 RPM by the end of the interval. Keep it going all the way to the end. They're quite long fast pedaling efforts, these. Quite hard to hold an arbitrarily high cadence for a long time. Last couple of seconds, keep it going. And relax. Back down to what we call zone 2, cruising pace, which we'll pick back up after this third fast pedaling effort. We've got a nice little cruise period where I'll do a little bit more chatter in case you want to mute me. Okay. So just nice and relaxed, keep the fluids coming on board. Always really important to stay hydrated. Just on that, we did a session this Monday, on the most recent Monday, covering nutrition and hydration with our training partners, Total Endurance Nutrition, that you'll see advertised above as we go into the final fast pedaling effort. But that Monday assembly covered some really key principles on nutrition and hydration, particularly in a race context. Very much recommend having a watch of that. You'll be able to find that as part of our cycle seminar series on the website. Should be released soon. Anyway, focusing on this final fast bending effort, this time we want to top out at about 120 RPM. So ignore the target. By the end of the next 20 seconds, when you're at 120 RPM, still relaxing the upper body, still keeping it nice and composed, and that bum planted on the saddle. Last 2 seconds. Okay, good, and relax. Okay, so we've got a little cruising period now, so you can relax, start taking the fluids on board, keeping them coming on until we hit that first 15-minute interval. So if you're interested in your training stress scores, we're at 70 TSS, which is very much at the top end of where we tend to get to on these sessions. Okay, sometimes we might go a bit above that if we've got a big anaerobic component to the sessions. So my main advice to you on these types of intervals is break them up. So one of the challenges when we're talking about an end of range session, as I said, really from a physical perspective, these intervals should be hard but manageable. You should be able to get through them feeling relatively strong, but it's mainly the mental component. 15 minutes at your FTP is a long time, and it's keeping yourself motivated, it's keeping the positivity going through your head, and I think this is definitely a session where having a group to ride with, or someone like myself leading you through the session, it helps just give you something else to think about. But I think your main priority through these efforts should be just firing positive messages through your mind and approaching it with a positive attitude. I know that sounds a touch patronizing, but honestly, approaching a session like this, just kind of bigging yourself up. Even if you had a bit of a miserable day and you've got other stuff going on through your mind and you're distracted, now's the time. You've got time. Let's start focusing on what it is we've got to do. Okay, this should be your main focus now. This should be your world. To put it in a hyperbolic state. Okay, so just start to focus on your breathing. Okay, if you want to, one thing you can do is just sort of shut your eyes and just focus on your inhalations and your exhalations. I might sound a bit cuckoo, but honestly, just little things like that, what they do is they just draw your mind to the present. They draw your mind to what you're up to, what you're doing at that second. Okay, and it starts to kind of get rid of all the other crap swirling around your mind, because you're going to need every ounce of kind of your mental powers to get yourself through these efforts relatively comfortably. Okay, so flip it round. If you're distracted and thinking about other stuff, this session can quickly get on top of you, and it doesn't need to. All right, so let's start bigging ourselves up. If you want to, you can say it out loud. You really don't have to. You don't have to tell anyone that you've done this, but just start bigging yourself up. Tell yourself that you got this. Tell yourself that you're good at this stuff. Say the things that you should perhaps be saying to yourself, but it's so much easier, particularly when you're tired, working hard, to kind of doubt yourself. No room for doubt in this session. So let's start firing through those positive messages. You don't even have to believe it to begin with, but I promise you, keep saying it and it will lift you. You won't even notice it happening. Another tactic you might want to employ is just imagining it in context. Okay, so in this session we're on Borrego Springs. This is pure time trial territory, okay? Or I guess they do lots of crits around this sort of area, but in our context, this is time trial territory. Okay? Alternatively, you can just imagine you're racing against your biggest foe, or imagine you're racing in a important road race or e-race or something. Whatever you want. Imagining a competitive contest is really good for kind of getting the adrenaline going, getting you fired up, and just kind of getting you really focused. Okay, so whatever you got to do, the positivity starts now. All right. So, got about 1:20 until we get cracking. So let's bring the leg speed up. Let's make sure it's where we want to. Let's get those kind of last pre-interval fluids on. We want that leg speed to be at least above 85 right now, 85 RPM. When we're into the interval, we want to be upwards of 90, closer to 100 RPM all the way through. So just remember our kind of trigger point. If your cadence drops below 80 RPM consistently for more than about 15-30 seconds, that's telling us that erg mode's got on top of you and you need to turn it off. Doesn't mean packing the session, just means take that kind of anvil off your back. All right, so let's get pumped. Let's pick up that leg speed. Let's get ready for the power to feed it. Remember, we're staying in erg mode for as long as we can. Going up to 100% of FTP. So guys, this should feel like an 8 out of 10 effort. All right. So 10 being a full-on sprint. So just remember that. If it gets beyond that and you're really, really suffering, remember what we were saying in terms of what it might say about your FTP, but you don't necessarily want to think about that now. You want to think about positivity. So here we go, come on. So pick up the leg speed, get it up above 90 RPM at the very least, closer to 100. And let's get stuck into this. So remember what I said about breaking it up? If this was me, well, it is me, but if I was doing this effort session and not coaching, I'd be breaking it up into 3 5-minute segments. I want to break it up into 3-minute segments. It's entirely up to you, but that's how I would do it, into 5, and that's how I'm going to kind of prompt you through it. So this is going to take a while to get into, so don't worry if you're feeling this is hard, like proper hard right now. You will relax into it, and you've got to do everything you can to help that relaxation. So soften the elbows, draw the shoulders away from the ears. Okay, it's just going to help open up the chest. Get your cadence above 90, and let's just start ticking this down. Okay, just keep on relaxing. Just keep telling yourself to draw those shoulders away from the ears. This is a time trial effort, and all the best time trialists are super relaxed when they're on their TT bike. If you want to, get aero. So down the drops, full TT mode, or lying on top of the hoods, or on the aero bars if you're on a TT bike. Whatever your poison. But make sure when you're in that position, you're relaxing the upper body. This whole central pillar is staying nice and still. It's just the legs that are working hard. So steady as she goes, guys. Your primary focus really with erg mode on isn't power, it should be your cadence. Okay, so making sure that leg speed stayed nice and high, and just try to avoid kind of peaking and troughing with the cadence. Try and keep it as consistent as possible, because of the way erg mode wants to spin that flywheel at consistent velocity. Every time that cadence slows down significantly, and then you have to bring it back up to level. Every time you do that, that's extra energy expended. And we're all about efficiency right now. Well done, guys. Keep relaxing. It's not something you'll just do naturally, but keep reminding yourself, be strict. Okay, we're into the final minute of that first 5-minute sector. So let's get this first 5 minutes down. Don't look too far ahead. Get steady, keep it steady. And the leg speed as consistent as possible. So let it drift, stay focused. That's a big part of this. That's a big part of why this is so tough. Is to do this efficiently, you have to stay super focused. Make the mind work hard so the legs don't have to do so much. Okay. There we go, so that's the first 5-minute sector down. On to sector 2. So just refresh the mind a little bit, refresh the leg speed. Heart rate should be creeping up towards threshold levels. This is definitely a session that you want to do with the heart rate monitor. Don't stress if you haven't got one now, but if you redo this session at any point, make sure you got a heart rate monitor when you do it. And I'll be telling you why in the recovery period. You can keep taking little sips of water. The fluid's coming on board. This is when it starts to bite. This is when that positive messaging really starts to matter, guys. So just for anything you can think of that's positive, it doesn't have to be particularly imaginative. You've got this. Crush this, whatever it is. Don't leave room for qualification. So don't say, you know, you might do this or you've got a good chance. It's you're bloody well gonna. All right. Keep on saying it to yourself. Gonna do this, gonna smash this, gonna drive straight through this, gonna keep my leg speed upwards of 90 RPM. I'm just gonna roll straight through this like a freight train. Okay? No messing around. No room. No room. Second guess. Come on. We're over halfway through this first interval now. Halfway through, over halfway through the second sector as well. Remind yourself to relax. I know it's annoying me, keep saying it, to relax in the shoulders, but what that does is creates shock absorbers in your arms. It means you've got a stronger base on the saddle, and it means it's just taking the strain off the legs so they can work on pedaling. Otherwise, what starts to happen is you start to bounce and you're wasting wattage on that upwards kind of lift. But we just want the power going straight through the pedals. So staying relaxed is crucial, albeit annoying to keep hearing out. We're into the last minute of the second sector. Okay, last 10 seconds of this second sector. Here we go then, last 5 minutes. So refresh. Refresh the effort, refresh the thoughts going through your mind. Last little push, just remember that last push until you've got a lovely recovery sector, okay? So the message is clear and simple. Last effort. Keep driving, keep pushing. Keep that leg speed well above 90 RPM. Do not let it drop. This is when it matters. One down, 4 to go. Just keep ticking off those minutes. Keep relaxing as best you can. Okay, coming into the last 3 minutes then, guys. Just keep that drive. Keep that positive messaging. You've got this. Let's finish it off. Come on. Right then, coming up to halfway through this final sector. Got 2.5 minutes to push. All right, let's just drive it all the way to the line. Don't allow yourself to drop that leg speed. Just 2 minutes of hard work coming up. Here we go, come on. Pick up the leg speed, let's go for this, come on. Approaching 90 seconds. To me, that always means that the finishing line, the end of the interval, is within touching distance. Okay, 90 seconds, come on, stay strong. Here we are then, last 60 seconds. Come on, into the last push. Remember that one last relaxation of the shoulders, keeping that leg speed nice and high for the final time. God, it's so close now. Last 30 then. It generally is within touching distance now, just so close. Just keep on pushing, push, push, push. Ten to go then, come on. Three, two, one. Yes. And relax. And relax. Spin up the legs. Just chill out. Well done. Got a lovely 5 minutes of pure recovery now. Do not think about anything else. Just relax, guys. Really well done. Okay. So start getting the fluids back on board. And once you kind of regathered yourself, try to pick up the leg speed back above about 80 RPM so that you can kind of help flush out some of the lactate that will have accrued in your legs. Okay, you want to be pedaling nice and efficiently for that. So really well done. So I think at least one of the, I don't know, beauties of this session, it's not really the right phrase, but at least kind of one of the easier things to get on top of is that there's only 2 intervals. So you're already well over halfway through the session. You've just got one big interval left and that's it. Okay, I always find that is somewhat reassuring. I could just get a sense of everybody stabbing voodoo dolls of me right now, but you know, I do think things like that help. You've got nothing else to think about other than this next interval. One couple of little points there in terms of what we want to think about after the session. Okay, in terms of post-session analysis, we always do encourage you, particularly with these discovery series sessions, these profiling sessions, we always really encourage you to look at your data after the session. Now, the key things you want to look at are, well, hopefully your power is steady because you're in erg mode. It's very straightforward in that respect. Obviously, if you end up having to take erg mode off for whatever reason, you want to compare the 2 intervals, see how you get on in comparison. But assuming that you've done both sets in erg mode, one of the things you want to look at after the session is your average cadence, see how that evolves over the course of both sets, whether there's a big drop off in your average cadence. Even if you stay with above that kind of 80 RPM threshold, you know, is there a big drop off? Do you drop from 100 to 90 average or whatever? You know, that's telling you something. Look at your heart rate, so important one. What's your average heart rate for both efforts? Is there a significant uptick in the second? Your heart rate can always tell you the story, particularly if you're finding a session disproportionately horrible. You know, is your heart rate significantly elevated beyond threshold during those intervals, or commonly is it depressed? Is it significantly below? So often when your heart rate is depressed, it can also tell you maybe that you're unwell or carrying too much fatigue. I often find that when I'm come down with something, my heart rate will, during the warm-up of the session, will be significantly lower than it should be, really. And also it's coupled with the feeling pretty rubbish. But also another thing that we want to have a look at, we talked about aerobic decoupling in other sessions, but you want to look at your power to heart rate ratio. How does that sit in both intervals? Ideally you want to keep it, ideally it wants to sit below about 5%. So if you're not familiar with this metric, guys, it's one that you can access in Training Peaks at least, and Golden Cheetah I believe as well. But your power to heart rate ratio, basically your power and your heart rate should be linked. They should be kind of tracking in the same sort of trajectory. Decoupling effect is basically when they separate, and in this instance what will likely happen if you're holding consistent power, if your heart rate and power decouple, it means your heart rate will rise beyond kind of where it should sit in line with your consistent FTP power. So that's something to look out for, and we want that decoupling effect to basically remain under 5%. If it goes above, significantly above, can say a couple of things really. Can say that you're overly fatigued, or also might say you're lacking a bit of aerobic endurance, kind of like we talked about earlier. Anyway, so that's a few things to think about after the session. For now, you've got the big challenge, round 2. Here we go, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's hit it then, guys. Come on, pick up that leg speed, get yourself going again. Back up above 90 RPM, powers back up to 100% of FTP. We're ready to rock and roll. We're ready to do some damage to this interval, and we're not going to take any crap from it. We're going to keep our leg speed above 90 RPM at all times, closer to 100 if we can, and we're just going to roll our way straight through it. Break it up into those 3 5-minute intervals, or we prefer those 5 3-minute intervals. I think I can do that maths, but I still doubt myself. But get up to speed, get up to leg speed, and once you've done that, that first reminder to relax into time trial mode. Entire central pillar stays still, arms, shoulders relaxed, and we just motor our way through it. Come on, guys, you can do this. I always find, if you found yourself kind of doubting the first interval, I often find the first interval, and don't shoot me for saying this, I often find the first interval harder than the second, and often that is because it's still warming up. So don't be put off if you found that first one really hard. You're going to be nice and warm. You also would have a bit of kind of pure recovery under your belt. So let's use that kind of confidence. Let's go into this with a fresh mindset and really just kind of give it hell. So remember, this should feel like an 8 out of 10 effort all the way through. 10 being a full-on sprint. That's the level that we're working at. Albeit that 8 seems to come in bold typeface and illuminated or whatever, highlighted. Still should be roughly where we're at. And we're looking to creep up towards threshold heart rate and leveling off there. Will take a while to get there. That's where it should sit. So just remember, this is the final interval of the session. This is the final big effort of the session. Nothing to do after this. So don't think about anything else. Your focus should be entirely on this first sector. Don't think about dinner. Don't think about anything else going on in your life. That can all wait for you afterwards. Your focus should be on this. Okay, you're doing a fantastic job. Just keep wanting yourself to relax. Keep that leg speed nice and high. Remember, we're going to be looking at that average cadence after the session. So let's try and be as consistent as possible. Okay, last minute of this first 5-minute sector. You're already chopping this interval down, guys. Last 30 seconds of the sector. Okay, 10 seconds, then we press the refresh button. Okay, there we go, on to the second sector. So refresh everything that's going through your mind. Start the positive messaging going through again. You've already chopped off a huge chunk of this interval. We're into sector 2 now. This is your whole world, your whole universe, and this second sector. Don't look beyond, don't think about anything before. Just focus, keeping that leg speed nice and high. You're doing a brilliant job. Keep telling yourself that, come on, you're gonna do this. Do not let yourself off the hook now, come on. Keep battling. The battlers in here should be in the legs, although they're doing a hell of a job. That battle is in your mind for the second interval. You have this in you. 77 TSS in the bag after this. That's a big old training effect. You want that training effect. You want to take it to the next level, and that's what we're here for. .30 seconds and then we're halfway through. You're reminded to relax. I will keep annoying you with it, but it is important. Get that bum planted firmly on the saddle. If you're starting to really feel it, remember, we don't care too much about being aero, but it is good to practice. But if you're really finding it hard, get those hands in the middle of the bars. That's going to push you back on the saddle, get your glutes a little bit more involved, and just help you eke out a few more watts. Well over halfway now. Approaching the last 2 minutes of this middle sector. Try to keep the fluids coming on board if you can. Just little sips. Just help cool you down as well. Remember that chat we've had about on various occasions about the power of hydration, that internal coolant running through your veins, pumping up that blood plasma, helping you sweat, keep the fluids coming on board. Right, one last minute in sector 2, and then we're on to that final drive for the line. So this is where imagining those different race contexts come in handy. So imagine you're on Von 2 or somewhere like that, you know, a climb, a tempo climb where you can just hold threshold and just ride people off your wheel. Imagine you're doing something like that, or the Stelvio, okay? And let's just get ready to kind of really put the nail in the coffin of our adversaries, okay? Got about 25 seconds till we hit that point, and then just imagine it in your mind. You got someone sitting on your wheel, they're in firmly penned in the hurt locker, and we're just gonna wave them goodbye. Come on guys, let's do this. Let's finish this off nice and strong. Last 5 minutes of hard work coming up. Here we go. Refresh the clock, refresh your mind. Let's ride them off the wheel. Okay, let's put them straight into the red while we cruise on our threshold, okay? 90 RPM and above. Let's just drive this, come on. You can see in the corner of your eye they're starting to suffer. Their body language is all negative, yours is positive. You look like you've just been through a stroll. You look like you've just rolled out of the pub. You're happy. Life couldn't be better. Theirs couldn't be worse, okay? Let's be sadistic, okay? Come on, let's roll them off our wheel. That's the first minute down. We've got 4 minutes to break them. Just keep that leg speed nice and high. Relaxing the shoulders. Remember, your body language is going to tell other people things. If you're all tense and rocking and rolling, it's going to tell them that you're suffering. So relax in the upper body. Get that bum planted on the saddle. Spin this through, come on. This is where that consistent leg speed really counts, because now any kind of accelerations and decelerations and any extra expended energy, it's not a good thing. So let's stay nailed on, focus, and drive it to the line. You're approaching that last 2.5 minutes, similar to the 90-second mark. Whenever I'm in a long interval and I see 2.5 minutes, I know I can finish the job, and that's how you should feel now, okay? 2.5 minutes, you can do this. Shouldn't be any doubt in your mind now. You're within touching distance. You just got to finish off the job. Ignore what your legs are telling you. Start thinking about this. Get that positive attitude to take you through. Last 2 minutes to go. Approaching that 90-second mark, that golden 90 seconds that tells you you can do this. Do anything for that 90 seconds. Come on. Lift the leg speed one last time. Let's just drive this through to the line. Nothing's going to get in your way now. You've got this. Into the last 60 seconds. Last little push. Come on, last 60 seconds of hard work in a big old session. 77 TSS coming in your back, coming into your checkout. 45, come on. Let's finish strong. Let's finish relaxed. Let's finish with a high leg speed. Let's finish off with absolute perfection. $20. $10. Keep going all the way to the end. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax. Really well done. Really well done. That is a brutal effort. That is such a long time on the edge. Really well done. Just to relax, get the fluids back on board, spin the legs up. Once you've kind of composed yourself, make sure you pick the leg speed back up, get it back above 80. Just on the cool down. Take all the cool down. You really want to kind of unwind the legs after that. Make sure you have a nice good old stretch afterwards. Get the protein on board. Get the recovery on. Because that 77 TSS, that's a big old training effect. That's going to take some recovery. So guys, just whilst you're easing off, just talk you through kind of some of the things that we talked about. The point of this session was all about kind of testing that aerobic capacity, that ability to hold that high power for a long period of time. Okay, if you smash those two intervals and you felt strong throughout and it was relatively unproblematic, yep, then it's potentially time for an FTP test. Okay, that's what this session's really about. If you nailed that, probably time for an FTP test. Okay, on the flip side, if you found that disproportionately hard, and you know, when we're saying an 8 out of 10 effort was more like a 9, and you really had to battle, and you know, you're on the edge the whole time, or potentially you didn't finish both segments, both intervals with erg mode on, don't be down on yourself. Okay, don't put yourself down. Don't suddenly start questioning your entire training approach or what you've done recently or consistency, etc. Okay, do not worry. Okay, there's a fair few things that can feed into it. One of them is accrued fatigue, you know, perhaps being under the weather, just tiredness. If you had a long day, you weren't in the right mental space. But you know, also it perhaps shouldn't be viewed as a bad thing. These sessions are about discovering something about yourself. So if this has told you that maybe, you know, your FTP is about potentially a bit too high, maybe you need to retest. Okay, do something other than a ramp or a 20-minute test. We do our full spectrum performance testing. If you're interested in that, drop us a note and we'll get you involved. Otherwise, you know, it's going to tell you perhaps you need to do some more aerobic base. And with that in mind, have a look at your power to heart rate ratio. Is it below that 5% decoupling rate? If it's significantly above that, again, remember, it can be down to accrued fatigue or illness or something like that brewing. But if it is significantly above that 5% decoupling rate, then yeah, it's probably telling you that whilst you might be strong, that underpinning base fitness isn't there. And you know, you might need to look at a bit more consistent and longer low intensity mileage. Okay, so however that went, do not start getting on top of yourself and berating yourself. The whole purpose of these types of sessions is to take this session in particular, is to take you to your limit of what you're capable of, tell you something about yourself and help steer your training. That's ultimately what we're trying to do, is steer you kind of to where you might want to focus your training. Okay, so we talked about a few of those metrics that we want to have a look at after the session. So compare your average cadence between intervals, compare your average heart rate, should be at and around your aerobic threshold heart rate, and then finally having a look at that decoupling rate as well, that power to heart rate ratio. Okay, but also always a really good idea after sessions like this just to make a literal note of how it went. Okay, and to be honest, it's good to do that after every session, keeping a little diary about how sessions go so you can look for patterns. So for instance, if this is the third session in a row where you struggled, that's going to tell you something. That's telling you probably you need to freshen up, need a bit more recovery. There's nothing wrong with that. You've got to deal with what your body's experienced, not what you would like it to be. So hopefully plenty learnt from that. Hopefully it went really well and you're feeling fantastic and you're like, right, time to smash that FTP test or that full spectrum performance testing. I'm going to get on the blur to RIAK and get that sorted out. Okay, hopefully that went well. But as I say, if it didn't, don't start getting on top of yourself. It's all about learning. Okay, so really well done. However it went, that is a tough session. So well done for getting through that. Last couple of seconds spinning up. Otherwise, that is you done. Go have a nice stretch, get the fluids back on board, and a nice high protein recovery meal. But well done everyone, really well done. Just remember you can hit us with any questions now, or if you prefer to, feel free to drop us an email, or you can drop us a message on social media, however you wish to get in touch. Do feel free to do so. Otherwise guys, that's session 9 of the Discovery series, and an absolute belter, I'm sure you agree, for better or for worse. But well done everyone, take care, look after yourselves, and we'll see you on the next session.